Welcome to PCB Chat, where we talk with experts across the printed circuit design, manufacturing, and electronics supply chain fields. I'm Mike Buetow, President of the Printed Circuit Engineering Association. I'm pleased to have joining me Wally Rhines. Wally is the spokesperson for the ESD Alliance, part of Semiconductor Equipment and Materials International. He is also well known for his long career as Chief Executive of Mentor Graphics. How are you doing today, Wally?
I'm doing fine, Mike. Good to talk again.
Wally joins us each quarter to share details from the latest ESD Alliance report on sales of computer-aided engineering tools, semiconductor tools, PCB design software, related IP and services, and employment. Today, we'll go over the results for the second quarter 2025, which ended June 30th. The data we are sharing was released by the ESD Alliance on October 6th. Now, Wally, every quarter we muse over this long rally PCB and MCM tools have been in, which is now 18 quarters long, and that's because Q2 continued the streak. Sales of PCB and MCM software were up nearly 8% year over year. Tell us more.
Well, they were indeed another strong quarter for PCB and multi-chip modules. It's something that I think when you go 18 quarters, it's more than an anomaly. It's a trend, and the trend is greater usage of PC tools. We can get into the specific type of tools, but just looking geographically, it bounces around, and this time the strong percentage growth was in Asia, Japan and Asia Pac, and normally Europe and US are same or higher level. They were weaker this time, especially Europe.
Can we surmise anything from that, or do you think that that's just one of those anomalies that we encounter over the the long history of the semiconductor and well, in this case PCB and MCM tool buying strategies?
Yeah, I don't think you can attach anything to a single quarter. Things bounce around, and to some extent, since the largest PCB software manufacturers in the U.S. are Siemens and Cadence. Siemens has its revenue recognition is a different from Cadence, and so you do get concentrations that reflect seasonality during the year.
Right, and the ESD Alliance doesn't try to, they don't modify or massage the data at all to account for the seasonality.
They do not. They give absolute numbers. So that's why we also give the 4-quarter moving average, just so that we can do a comparison. And in the case of printed circuit board design software, the 4-quarter moving average is pretty close to that 8% you mentioned. It's actually 8.8%. So just a little below the 4-quarter moving average, but still very strong compared to what we saw 10 years ago. You're now up, when you have a single quarter that's $430 million. You think about that, that's about $1.7 billion. We went for more than a decade and stalled out at about $1 billion worldwide market. And it's just grown and grown in this last decade substantially, probably for some reasons tied to the complexity of system design, because almost always the analysis tools are among the strongest for PCB.
Join PCEA on October 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern for a free 1-hour webinar on design and manufacturing of PCBs with unique RF features, especially as the industry shifts from high-density interconnect to ultra-HDI technologies. It highlights the performance advantages of UHDI in terms of trace definition, impedance control, and signal integrity, supported by new additive processes and advanced materials. Attendees are guided through considerations for material selection, RF feature implementation, for example, edge plating and via fences, and the challenges of building complex, high-performance boards. Presenter John Johnson is Director of Quality and Advanced Technology at ASC Sunstone and has held a variety of engineering, quality, sales, and senior management positions in his 45-plus years in the electronics industry. Visit pcea.net to register for this free webinar.
Now, you alluded to a little bit more detail. Can you provide a little bit more color in terms of the areas of PCB and MCM that were strong, or maybe comparatively weaker than the others?
Well, as I said, PCB analysis is almost always fast growing. It grew 25% this period compared to the same period a year ago, and it's quite a large category. The annual revenue for analysis tools, it approaches $500 million. Growing faster, though, this time, and this is somewhat unusual, was nearly 50% growth for package design. Now, once again, they always have to caution that not every reporting company puts all of their package design software in the same bucket. There are some that simply use printed circuit board design tools to do package design, and they report it with the normal layout tools. Others have specific package design tools, so it's a smaller category, I'm sure, than the actual package design. On the other hand, the fact that it's growing so substantially this time is an indicator that people are using more. And we also had very strong growth for library and data management. Where we didn't have strong growth was in the physical design and layout. And that is the largest category in PCB. But there are fluctuations. People buy layout tools sometimes at different times for different needs. And so I wouldn't take a single quarter as any sort of long-term trend.
You mentioned that Q2 was $430 million for PCB and MCM. And
yes.
I went back and looked back, and by my math, we're on about a $1.76 billion run rate the previous 4 quarters. And so verification or analysis would be not quite a third of the total available market for PCB tools.
That's right. The analysis tools, as you said, if you looked at the recent 4 quarters, it'd be $470 million. And as you said, the total PCB category is $1.76 billion. So roughly that percentage.
Yep. Wow. Now, Wally, we usually talk about employment at the end of our chats, but for me, the most remarkable revelation of the ESDA data this quarter was the jump in hiring during the period.
I think you're right, Mike. Really remarkable. Up 14.8% over the same period a year ago. And this is one of the unique mysteries of data reporting in EDA. We almost always have positive growth in employment, even in tough times. But you can only grow the employment faster than the revenue grows for so long. Here you're growing it almost twice as fast. So that suggests that people are anticipating a rapid future growth, or they wouldn't be hiring the additional people.
Unbelievable. Now, getting back to the tool growth, almost every segment was up except for IC physical design and verification.
Yes. Every category in total was positive. The reporting companies for IP were sort of flat, but every other category grew except physical design and verification. And that one does tend to be more seasonal. At least one company has a very large share of their revenue there, and so they tend to have big quarters and light quarters because they recognize the revenue, at least 2/3 of the revenue up front, whereas the other large U.S. producers, Cadence and Synopsys, do theirs ratably, so theirs is much smoother.
Should PCB be concerned if IC tools sales are falling, or is that just, again, one of the kind of seasonality blips, and it's not really indicative necessarily of a bigger trend?
Well, PCB is growing at about the same rate as the overall EDA growth. Overall EDA was 8.6%. So at 7.8%, very close to the median. I don't think there's very good correlation here, because we're really talking about a different set of designers who actually lay out printed circuit boards and do the analysis, particularly signal integrity and thermal analysis. And so different kinds of companies, different kinds of people. Systems companies, automotive, aerospace, others tend to be heavy users of printed circuit board design. They're very light users of IC design tools.
Do we have any sense of whether the U.S. government policies regarding China's purchase of IC design tools have any effect on the current buying patterns? Are companies, to your knowledge, speeding up planned buys in anticipation of a ban, or there's maybe a bit of a step back afterwards?
Well, they're two different phenomena. We had a threat during this past quarter that there would be a shutdown of sales to China of all EDA, and that caused a panic, but it lasted only a couple weeks and went away. So I don't think it had a material effect on the overall numbers. Now, the issue of pull-aheads for purchases, certainly a lot are speculating that happened in the integrated circuit business, where people pulled ahead purchases of end equipment, and that caused an acceleration in demand for the integrated circuits, because a lot of consumer products were affected by or will be affected by the tariffs. Very hard to measure that, hard to tell, but certainly the electronics industry and the semiconductor industry have been especially healthy the last couple quarters, and so one has to wonder whether that isn't a buy-ahead effect rather than simply the overall growth in demand and in the economy.
If you think back over your career in IC and PCB design tools, can you think of a time where there was an event or even the threat of an event that affected the market, that had a ripple effect on the market's buying patterns?
Well, the semiconductor industry has been historically very cyclical, and if anything, it's less cyclical than it used to be. And then for EDA, which used to be very volatile when the requirements for revenue recognition required that software upon delivery became recognizable for revenue, it has certainly smoothed out. But going into a recession, we could always tell there would be an uptick in the purchases of EDA tools, and I've always attributed that to the fact that engineers can see a recession coming and they try to stock up. And then as you come out of a recession, there's a very slow recovery because companies try to get their R&D and EDA spending back in line as a percentage of revenue. So those are things that happen regularly. It's cyclical. In terms of a macroeconomic event, the last I can remember like this was 2008, 2009, where we had sort of a meltdown across the whole economy. And before that, 1988, I believe, it was when we had the Asian crisis, sometime in that range. And those are precipitous drops that happened. And then 1999 was an enormous bubble year right before the dot-com crash. So they do happen. This one doesn't look quite like that. We're talking about still mid-single-digit growth, and the semiconductor industry over many decades has had at least a 7% growth rate.
Was there anything else in this quarter's data that jumped out at you?
Well, one thing was that China has eased up a bit. China was first of all, had been the driver of the Asia Pac for quite some time. And then over the last 5 quarters, it became very weak. And it's this time went back into positive territory for EDA, not for IP purchases. And so whatever was going on that caused the cutback in purchases at least seems to have partially recovered this time. The other thing that stood out for him is the strength of India. A lot of purchases. We saw India growth quarter to quarter, 32% overall. And within that, EDA was 40% growth. That's exceptional, and I have to attribute that to the number of businesses that may be moving from China to India or just starting up in India. And Taiwan was also quite strong. EDA purchases in Taiwan were close to 40% growth. So they're making up to some extent the weakness in China that continues, even though it's turned positive.
Wow, well, those really are some significant numbers. I mean, I know that they're not necessarily starting from the same baseline as China, but those are still really big jumps.
Yeah, and they're not insignificant. Taiwan buys $1 billion worth of EDA and IP product every year, and India $500 million. So not enormous, but they were talking about a $20 billion TAM. So they've got their piece of it.
Well, Wally, I want to thank you again for joining us each quarter and bringing folks up to date with a lot of really valuable information. I really recommend people take a look at what the ESD Alliance offers. They should probably think about joining. There's a lot more data involved that's available to their members. Wally, I hope you have a great fall, and I'll talk to you soon.
Well, thank you, Mike. Good to talk again.
For PCB Chat, this is Mike Buetow. Have a good day.